And we're going to get into pre-construction and kind of touch on why some builders are better than others and why pre-construction is such a lucrative opportunity.
Always or certain times?
Pre-construction? I'm not going to say always. Or I can say always, but sometimes they're more lucrative than others. You know what I mean? So some of the advantages, very rapid appreciation. I'll give you an example that a couple of you know of. So there was a property, it was a freehold townhouse that I bought a few years ago, a year before it was built, right? Corner unit, nice lot. I bought it at $460,000 from the builder, right? And a year later when it was built, a couple of my neighbors down were selling for $640,000. So in 1 year it went up $180,000. My deposit, my investment, my capital was $35,000. So on $35,000, I made $180,000 in a year, right? And this is not like a rare thing. This is the reason why some people solely invest in pre-construction, right? And then we'll get into assignment sales, which is kind of an offshoot of pre-construction where, so it's not common in houses because you only have a year or so to work with. But in condos, high-rise condos, a lot of times they're selling units 3 or 4 years before it's built, right? And so there are buildings being built right now downtown Toronto that it's worth, a unit there might be worth $600,000, but was initially bought for $300,000 3 years ago, right? And so what the initial buyer will do is, let's say, buy it at $300,000 with a deposit of maybe $60,000, right? And maybe 6 months before it's built, they'll sell the right to buy that unit. It's called an assignment sale. And they'll sell it for, instead of $300,000 profit, $250,000. So the end buyer will have saved $50,000, and the original buyer made off like a bandit. Everybody's happy. You get what I mean? That's an assignment sale. My colleague, who's a lawyer, will be coming in to talk about some of the legalities of the assignment sale. So very rapid appreciation. It appreciates with no expenses. So during the time that you're waiting for this house to be built, there's no mortgage, there's no property tax, there's no anything, right? It's just going up in value on its own.
But there are, I've heard, and there's one around my area where the people put the deposits in and the building has gone belly up.
Yeah, that happens. And it's not that it's an expense.
Some people do end up putting money deposits down and then the builder goes belly up. So you're. So how about like, what's the. You lose your money.
So it's not that you lose your money. So let's say that you put a deposit down on a pre-construction condo building, right? And let's say that they project this building is going to be built in 2023. You put down $60,000. It's going to be a great opportunity. And then maybe 6 months or a year later, builder files for bankruptcy, or they tell you the project's not going to be built. Whatever happens, it's not going to go forward, right? So typically that's when you have to apply to the government. There are some remedies. You're going to sue that builder if they don't return your deposit. They usually do return the deposit. The trouble is, so they haven't necessarily filed for bankruptcy. Some do, right? But they usually do return the deposit. In the times that they do return the deposit, the only thing you've lost is opportunity. Because if we're talking about appreciation being the reason why you bought that unit, and after 3 years you're expecting to double your money or triple your money or whatever it is, and all they're doing is returning your deposit, and you could have parked that money somewhere else and made money on it, it's lost opportunity, right? The builder, like I said, they usually do return it. In the cases where they don't return it, usually it ends up in like the Toronto Star. I've read about those situations where a number of the potential buyers had to come together in class action lawsuit this builder, right? If they have filed for bankruptcy, it gets sticky because that means that they're basically saying we don't have all the money to return the deposits. That's what that means, right? So it's not a win in every case. So this is why we're actually going to talk about some of the builders that I prefer. You know what I mean? It does come down to when you're making a decision, and this is on the next slide, where, like location, but also which builder you want to get into bed with. That's what you're doing, right? Like it's a major investment. So yeah, you have to do your due diligence. So what were we saying? Yeah, so it appreciates during that time. You don't have any mortgage paying or property tax or anything like that. Also, you get a new warranty. Tear-on warranty, there's a 7-year warranty on everything that's major, right? So the foundation, the structure, the major stuff, and a 2-year warranty on the minor stuff, little cracks and stuff like that throughout the house. Also, because there's a warranty, you don't have any major expenses, repairs, right? Some builders will accept a 5% deposit, which is great because if all you're doing is essentially parking your money and appreciating it, you want to park as little as possible, right? Rather than 20%, if you can get away with a 5% deposit, great, because you're still going to make the same amount of appreciation. Some builders will allow the assignment sales, some won't, right? Some will say, look, we're trying to sell units. If you're selling units at the same time as a conflict, you won't allow it. But most builders, particularly high-rise builders, they allow it because they know that it's an investor's game, so they're trying to attract the investors.
So the idea behind this, when you're buying new construction, you just leave as basic as possible. Because don't a lot of these builders say, well, you can upgrade the floors, but it's going to cost you a couple of thousand. You can upgrade this, appliances. So do you pay those for those upgrades, or do you leave it at the basic?
So a lot of that depends on what you plan on doing when it's built. So some people who are just selling the assignment will just do it basic. I prefer to close and then rent it out for another 2 to 3 years because the property does continue to appreciate rapidly for the first few years afterwards. And so I go for a good amount of upgrades, right, to make it attractive to the tenants. Certain upgrades I know that the builder is building in their profit margins, so certain things I know I can do aftermarket on my own. You know what I mean? So it kind of depends on which upgrades, but it also depends on what it is you're planning to do with this investment. So what are the major factors to look for? High demand area. So if you're talking about condos, you're looking at downtown Toronto, possibly Square One area, right? Places where people are attracted to, and high rises are in demand, right? Or you're looking for places where you're going to build a new GO train line or something like that, or some new attraction. Maybe Google's going to build a new headquarters, right? You're looking for something where that area is expected to bloom and blossom, and you're going to get a good return, right? You're going to want to compare price per square foot because they're going to be, in any given area, several builders offering their properties, and you're going to want to compare which builders are offering the best price per square foot. Now, this is a big one. It's one we mentioned before. For high-rise condos, I find the best builder is Tridel. I don't know if you heard of them, but I say they're the best not because they don't have some of the defects. They are pretty good in terms of the quality, but even more so the fact that they do their own property management. So you know how condo fees tend to go up year over year? That's a function of how well or how poorly the building is managed. Tridel does their own. So what I found is even in a 10 or 15-year-old Tridel building, the monthly fees hardly go up, right? Whereas in some of the more, attractive buildings, but with lesser known builders, the fees are skyrocketing like crazy. So a good example, if you look at Mississauga Square One area, right? The absolute buildings, Marilyn Monroe, really attractive, horrendous investment, right? Properties there, the values have actually gone down because the maintenance fees have gone up so much. Just poor management. So it's a very attractive looking building, very cutting edge and all that stuff. But from an investment standpoint, it's poorly managed, and so the values aren't going up. Walking distance from there is Tridel's Ovation buildings. They're about 12 years old or so. Maintenance fees are half or less than half as much as at Marilyn Monroe buildings, right? Now, the Tridel buildings, their units inside are very basic, right? Almost unattractively basic, right? Outside, it looks like a huge hotel, waterfalls, whatever. It's beautiful. You go inside the unit though, it's pretty basic, which is fine. Most people like to renovate to their own tastes, but yeah, Tridel is a good example of a quality builder who stands behind the product. I don't mean that to give you a Tridel commercial, but just to underscore the fact that you got to kind of research the builders, particularly with condos. Single-family houses, I personally prefer Mattamy. Reason being is they also have defects just like any other builder, but they're a lot more responsive. You call them, they're coming out to fix your house, right? Whereas most other builders are going to give you the runaround till infinity, right? Also, from an investor standpoint, the demand is just more for a Mattamy home. Like literally, when they announce an opening at one of their sales centers, people are lined up 4 days, right? So that kind of demand is just it's good for an investor, right? You want to know that when you put your property on the market, there's going to be a lot of demand for it, right? Also, you want to look at what's included: appliances, upgrades, amenities. Some of the condos, the new high-rise condos, have bowling alleys, basketball courts, movie theaters, so on and so forth. So if you're marketed to an area where there are a lot of young people, like 20s and 30s, they like the amenities, right?
Aren't you paying for it?
So, of course, you are paying for them. But what I've noticed is that if you can find a building where a couple buildings are sharing those amenities, the maintenance fees are lower, right? So a good example of that, City Place, downtown Toronto, right by Skydome there. So I used to own there. There's 4 buildings that share the same amenities, and they are world-class facilities, like 50-meter pool, bowling alley, whatever. They have everything. Yet the maintenance fees are low, because instead of, let's say, 100 homeowners paying into these amenities, you have 400, and so the cost is divided by that many people, right? So it just depends, right? Allowances. So again, some builders will allow you to sell pre-construction on assignment. Some builders will not. So it's something that, if that's part of your strategy, if you plan on not closing, because there are costs when it comes to closing, right? You have to pay development levies, you have to pay the lawyer, you have to pay land transfer tax, HST. So if you don't plan on closing, selling on assignment is something you want to look for and make sure it's allowable by the developer. A lot of builders don't allow Airbnb, right? And so for that reason, the buildings that do allow Airbnb are going to be a lot more attractive to the investor, right? Oh no, what did I do? Okay. Whew. Scared there.
So when you say you can't run an assignment, that means you have to live in the property?
It means that you have to close. You don't necessarily have to live there, but you do have to complete the closing from the builder, and then you can sell it if you want, or rent it out, or whatever. What was the question? So the question was, if they're not allowing assignments, do you have to live in the property? The answer is no, you don't have to live there, but you do have to complete the closing, right?
In some situations where you have to hold on to the house for a certain period of time after.
That's more of a taxation question. So another question I look for as an investor is, are you able to lease during occupancy? So this is more of a high-rise condo thing. So if you have bought on a lower floor in a high-rise building, they'll have completed your unit while they're still working upstairs, right? And there'll be an occupancy period. So you can't go out and get a mortgage on this property yet, but they allow you to live there and pay an occupancy fee each month, right? In that time, if they allow it, you can rent that out to a tenant, right? Until the building is complete and you have to actually get a mortgage to buy it and finish the closing. And your tenant can stay or whatever the case is, but a lot of builders don't allow you to lease out the unit while it's in occupancy. You guys follow that?
And townhouses are like that too.
Townhouse condos, yeah.
Even
So
though they're fully built, they still have an occupancy.
they still have an occupancy fee. Yeah, because it's a condo townhouse, right? And then they have kind of this hybrid model, which is what they call a stacked townhouse. So it's like 3 levels, and it's a hybrid between a traditional townhouse and a high-rise condo. It's stacked, and they're more common now because, again, we're running out of land, right? So most people, if they're older especially, don't want to live in a high-rise condo, but they'll more gravitate towards a stacked townhouse because it's more house-like. They don't have the huge maintenance fees that come along with the swimming pool and the bowling alley. It's a very small maintenance fee, usually about $100 a month, $150 a month, so it's manageable. But it is technically a condo. Okay, so the question was about builders putting a tenant in there, and then they they get the lease enforced, and then you have the right to essentially own it, and it's your tenant, but it's the builder who happened to get you tenant.
Yeah, so the guarantee is sort of now too, right? So if they rent it out for $2,100 and the agreement was $2,300, then they'll supplement the extra $200 when they're not getting it.
So more and more builders are catering towards the investor, right? And a lot of these buildings are going up in places like Kitchener, Waterloo, around the university area, or like Kingston, again, or Niagara, around the university areas where they'll find you a tenant and they'll guarantee you a certain amount of rent. Even if, let's say, they have an issue and they can't find a tenant, they're still guaranteeing you your rent, right? So I don't necessarily get into those kind of investments because I've seen the numbers on them and I think I can do better on my own without having the builder go out and find a tenant. But sorry, what was your actual question about it?
Because there was, we bought an investment condo and they gave us the lease back option, or the other option was that they were going to give us back a certain amount of money. I don't remember what.
Okay.
So we ended up taking the lease back option, but now I'm like thinking, was that correct move?
It's hard to say. I'd have to see all the numbers involved to see. Go ahead.
I'm gonna say for lease back, I have the same thing. I've done the lease back, but you have to do your market rent. Like, so what you do is you look in that town, you go in Kijiji or whatever they use, and you see how much the average rent is, and then you know if it's good or not. You have to do your due diligence, and sometimes those lease back options, they're gearing, they're nicer buildings, they're gearing for a higher rent. So if they can get it,
Great,
power to them, and they guarantee it in your, if you saw your paper and you signed. So it actually is like a legal binding document. So they have to give you that rent for the whatever 2 years or 1 year. So I mean, I took advantage of it because I thought I don't know how the heck I'm going to get that rent. But if
You know what
they
they're
say
doing?
they can do it,
They're marketing to a lot of overseas students, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, if this is a student that's coming from a very rich family in Japan or Hong Kong or Dubai or wherever, their parents are loaded. They don't care, right? They'll pay that rent. And they're not familiar enough with the area to do the groundwork to go and find a cheaper apartment, nor do they care. So the university will reach out to those kind of people and get the rents that are otherwise you wouldn't be able to find in that area. You know what I mean?